Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 387. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com. We're excited to have with us the world-famous intuitive and naturopath, Dr. Kimberly McGeorge. Kimberly, how are you doing?
What are you talking about? You said world famous. I'm looking for that person. Where
See,
is
yeah. Before we went up, you've been on plenty of podcasts. You were also a guest on Coast to Coast AM. You have like an amazing background when it comes to a lot of work to do with kind of like intuitive therapies. Kind of get us started on how this journey kind of started for you.
I don't know. Some days I wake up and I'm like, who are you and what are you doing? What is this life? So, it's a wandering road. It's an experience. A lot of people say I call this a game. A lot of people say it's a school, what we call life, but I think we're really here for the experience. So we're here for the ride. I was talking to my daughter today and we were talking about like the safe choice versus like the risky, so I've always kind of taken the risky choice, and I'm really happy because it's landed me in this amazing profession, kind of like where you're at, I believe, where we don't have to make an income based on like society's expectation. We can make an income based on who we are and our passions, and our interests. And so, I was born, and everybody is. So I hate to try to make myself special because I don't think I'm special. I used to, when we're young, we have that little beautiful thing called ego. So I used to think, you're the only one that's psychic. You're the only one that's this. And of course we're all unique, but I was born really with access to my intuitive abilities, shut them down until college, kind of resurrected them when I moved away from my parents, had the opportunity through the buzz that went around campus. I went to school outside of Chicago to work with the police with occult crimes, and not, so I always say occult, OCCULT, not a cult crimes, but kind of the same thing. And, everybody's like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Well, I was 20 and I thought I knew everything. And like dead things are not cool when you're 20 and think you know everything, because you find out really quickly you know nothing. But what it was, it wasn't like the shows, or it kind of was like the shows like Medium or Ghost Whisper. What it did for me, it de-glamorized things and really brought real life way up in my face, which we kind of need when we're 20 sometimes. But what it did for me as a psychic is it gave me a bounce. So when you're talking to police that really are being forced to work with you because they're doing experimental programs and you're barely getting paid anything and it's not glamorous and you're up late at night and you're trudging through woods with 40-year-old men that just want to get back to the station, and you're coming across horrific things, you get to see if your remote viewing was accurate. You get to see if the shed had pink and green spray paint on it. And then if it didn't, you get to see where you're off. So you start to learn your own abilities, and then you have what I call the bounce. And a lot of the reason people don't make money from their psychic abilities or don't sharpen them is they weren't lucky enough when they were 20 to have some real harsh bounce, because there's nothing like being mocked by a bunch of cops, you guys. I'm telling you, it is not glamorous and it is not fun. And yes, I cried many times, because they would make fun of me even when I was right. You have to know men. And back in the day, you have to know how cops were back then. They may be nicer now. I don't know. But, so I came through that experience, but it really sharpened my abilities. And it actually eventually gave me a lot of confidence, because then I started getting called in on what we would call in the old days exorcism cases. And again, that's an over glamorized profession, and not fun, very dangerous. The more serious cases, now we would call them deliverance. And now I have a totally different view, which we don't have to go into, about the body and, body jumping and all this other stuff. But back then, again, I thought I knew everything. But, I just had this really deep, like paranormal psychic like test, and it was good. It was horrible, but it was good because I found, where I didn't know what I didn't know. And then I found where I knew what I knew. And it was just really great. So that was kind of my hardcore paranormal stuff. Out of that, I felt confident to clear houses. If I could clear people, I felt, competent to clear land. I had the site, when I had my children all have the site. So my children ended up working with me on some really cool cases, really big cases, clearing some, really famous people's homes. And so just had a really cool experiences. I got to work all over the country, as a psychic medium long distance, I would go ahead of the ghost teams and I would say, put your cameras here and you're going to run into these spirits and here are their names. And again, at that point, I had the confidence, I knew I was, quote, right. Not that I needed to be right, but I knew my skills were real. I knew they were accurate, but it's still always nice. Even now, I love it when people say, oh my gosh, you're so amazing. You're so right. I still love that, I have to admit, because it just makes you feel good that you could help somebody, whether it's a team or whether it's an individual. So I've never not worked in the paranormal. I've dragged the paranormal. That's the door I came into everything. When I was a mother with children, I had health issues and I started exploring alternative health and, learned about applied kinesiology, eventually taught advanced applied kinesiology, learned about biofeedback machines, eventually had clinical practices with biofeedback machines. And that's where I got to meet world famous homeopathic doctors that worked with the royal family, people that traveled all over the world with organizations like yours, like just really great people that had like a different type of experience than like a United States clinical, kind of back then Western medicine experience. I met a lot of Eastern practitioners, but mainly running thousands of people's fields over the last, 35 years. I've learned so much from each person I come in contact with. So what I thought about the world and what I thought about health was not at all what the world is turning out to be in any area. And so, but that's because, we all have a frequency and everything can be read. And this is one of the secrets they're still sitting on is these body networks they have us all plugged into with AI. They know what you're going to choose before you choose it. So if you're sitting there, with your husband or wife or partner, and you're like, do you want seafood or steak or sushi for dinner? They already know. And if they want to be, they'll be in the parking lot ahead of you waiting for you, if they want to find you or whatever. So, there is nothing that cannot be known. And it's actually always been that way. And the mystics would say it in a different way, but now we have technology that can do it faster. And, all these big NSA buildings aren't there for nothing. They're there
Mhm.
because people think that they're reading your minds. They're actually not reading your minds. They're way ahead of you. They're reading because there is no time. All time is now. So they don't have to go to a future or past to pull information. They can pull anything they want. So can we, or use technology like they do. But we're sitting on these secrets. There's nothing that cannot be known. So how does that change life? It absolutely changes your life. If you can see people down to the marrow, which is how I can see people, and you can see homes and land and pets and cars, you're going to make a lot less mistakes, right? And some of that might be fun and sometimes it's not. So do I always look? No, just because I can see doesn't mean I look. But I think it's important that we understand that this technology is being used, quote, for evil against us. And I think more people need to learn how to use it for, quote, good or for their own benefit, if that makes any sense.
For those that are kind of curious about this, because I know that you talk a little bit about frequency and then talk about a little bit about energy. Are those two separate definitions or are those interchangeable, the word energy and frequency?
It could be, I mean, it can be interchangeable. People say everything's energy. That's true. But also, I think drilled down, everything has a frequency. So the
Mhm.
sum total of everything going on in your field, including what people would call past and future, even though I don't believe in that, is recorded in your field. Every thought you've had, every emotion, you can go current, you can go past, you can go future, whatever way you want to go. Your beliefs, your programming inserted, your implants, because we all have implants. It's another conversation. Your diseases, your bacteria, this can all be drilled down to specifics because it all has a frequency. So even if we want to look at the category of like parasites, every single parasite has its own frequency. So all I have to do is scan you and see which frequencies. And then I'm like, oh, 312.45 is a liver fluke, for example. I know that's gross. Sorry, you guys. Or, 724.58 is, suppressed rage. Or this guy hasn't done his work. He still has inner childhood stuff that he hasn't dealt with. Or this guy's having trouble in his relationship. Or this guy wants a relationship. Or this guy has a soulmate that he missed. Or this guy has a soulmate. I mean, we can go crazy woo-woo stuff that you would never guess that we could know. Do I have
Hmm.
an optimal partner in the game? Sometimes people, what I call the game, what you would call the world, so maybe, or whatever you guys call it. But some people, have lots of optimal partners. Some people don't. Some people's optimal partners are outside of here in other realities, other parallel timelines, other lives, other aspects of themselves. So we can go woo, woo, woo all day long and know 100% accuracy. And we can go hardcore medical or psychological with 100% accuracy. That is what people are shocked when they have a scan by me, because they're like, WTF? Like, they're like basically in a state of being stunned, because I call myself the lazy psychic. Do I use my experience as a naturopath with 4 clinical practices, seeing hundreds of patients? Absolutely. Do I use my psychic abilities? We use all of us. So I'm bringing all of me to the table, but I have this beautiful computerized, really fast AI cheat sheet that gives me the data that then I put together and speak the information to you. But really, I'm totally being lazy, because you are providing 100% of the data,
Hmm.
which is super cool. That's why it's accurate. That's why I can say
Right.
my scans are 100% accurate, because there's no misinterpretation when it's a readout from you.
Right. Well, hey there. If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep this show going. We love hearing from you, so any feedback is welcome. And thank you for being a part of our podcast family and for all your support. It truly means a lot to us. Have you noticed, though, as like in the last, I would say, half a decade, in the last 5 years or so, there just seems to be such a strong push into quantum physics. And
Mm,
have you seen some of the things that you've always intuitively known, where now fringe science is starting to lend credence almost as a Venn diagram? Like this stuff,
oh yeah,
there's starting to be
I love
some scientific. What are some of those examples of saying where someone would bring something up or maybe share an article with you and you'd be like, I knew that like 15 years ago. Like, are there?
that. I go back to the 1800s, which we had it always in Egypt. We had it, and always since the beginning
Right.
of this place, we've always had frequency and technology. But Vol, I go back to Vol, but a lot of people, like to say the really, popular names that are overquoted, that have to do with frequency, which I don't really believe were necessarily even associated with frequency. But that's a whole nother revisionist theory thing. But so just the fact that we can talk about frequency on shows like this, even though you might be awake and you might be conscious, I could go on CNN and talk about frequency and be accepted if I restrict it, not talking about soulmates and not talking about ETs, and not, if I narrow it down, I could have a totally straight up conversation. It would be totally accepted, totally understood, because now we know what frequency is. We all
Right.
have cell phones, we all have iPads, we all have satellite TV, we all have internet. I mean, I was still typing on a typewriter in college, you guys. Like, I didn't have a personal computer. I mean, wow, the speed that we, have this technology. So when you say, holographic universe, these are kids that put on a headset with no computer and, fight bad guys in the
Right.
air. So they understand that concept of the invisible made visible. They understand the whole paranormal world has blown up. The acceptance of ghost adventures and ghost hunters, they made it's okay, it's acceptable. You're allowed to now say in public that you've seen ghosts or that you hear EVPs, and then we can prove it. We have the free software. I have GarageBand, other people use Audacity, and we can see that the ghost is speaking. We can prove it. We can see the wavelength. So we have all this at home equipment where we can be detectives ourselves. We don't have to buy what the scientist is saying. It's so funny. Today, I took my phone, because people are always like, you have to do this and you have to put this on your phone. You have to do this to get ships in the sky, or what we call UFOs. But, I just took my phone today and I put it on, I have an iPhone 14 or 13 or something. And I put it up toward the sky. It was blue sky. And I pulled it out to 9 magnification, and I got hundreds of ships, and I took a screenshot, and I have like 10 in the frame. So we don't, we now have this ability, and you guys can do that too. And I can give you a ton of, exercises you guys can do to see the paranormal and see through what we call dimensions, even though there are no dimensions. The dimensions are dependent on your frequency. So everything is out there that ever could exist or is always possible to exist. It's you that needs to adjust to the expansion to be able to see or connect with whatever that is that you guys want to see or connect with. But yeah, so, we're just so restricted and we're not taught. I mean, they've handed us this technology that is just brilliant for, I have pictures of Sasquatch in the fur, what we call, where you can see the strands of fur, as a hardcore physical being. I have, class A photographs of little people. And again, I'm open to it and people are more open to it. So now I can talk to my, dad, who was a Vietnam vet, about Sasquatch. And because I did, guess what he told me? He told me he saw Sasquatch in the jungle in Vietnam. So people are so much more open to these conversations. And I like that we can be on podcasts like this and bring these ideas to the table, and we can all bring our little pieces of the puzzle and lay it down and say, how does this fit? And we can, begin these conversations. So what I'm finding is almost everyone, bar none, is open to having the conversation. I'm not saying they believe what I believe or they see what I see, but it's exciting. Like there's an awakening that is just so exciting to me, and starting to cast these programmed beliefs aside and be open to their own experience.
So when you bring up some of those things where people might tell a story about they saw this or they saw that, is that an example of somehow their frequency? Is it like in an accidental situation that they might happen, or is that the subconscious kind of pushing itself ahead, or how would you
Well, there's a Schumann resonance. And although the Schumann resonance doesn't hold, I don't believe, and I don't know that we necessarily know, and we might disagree where that's coming from. But you can get an app and download it on the phone, and you can monitor the Schumann resonance. And we have what I call whiteouts. So if you even pull it up from the last couple of days, there's plenty of small whiteouts. Sometimes there's huge whiteouts, but that's when there's frequency that you may not be initiating by your choices. You may not be drinking enough water. You may not be taking minerals. You may not be sleeping enough. You may be drinking too much alcohol. You may be eating junk food. So you may not be doing things that could raise your body or your spirit frequency on your own. But when these whiteouts come, they raise the collective frequency. So some of the things you said could be deemed as accidental because it's not the person raising their frequency to see it. It's kind of people say the veil thin, there is no veil. So the veil can't think because it's non-existent. But what it does is raise your frequency to start matching some of these beings. So for example, in what we call the fourth density, or people would call it the fourth dimension, we have the discarnates, from pets or loved ones that have just passed. And a lot of people do see those because they're in a heightened state of awareness. When their loved ones pass, there's adrenaline involved, there's emotion involved, which raises your frequency to a certain extent where you're more open to that stuff. You're upset, so your defenses are down. You don't have all the programming in. You're starting to think about life and death and, what all that means. And so a lot of people do see their relative spirit or soul, whatever you want to call it, leave the body, or they see angels. I call them angels, but angels or other beings. They see portals open or tunnels. And so, yeah, there's a lot to that. There's not one answer I can give you because each person's journey is so individual, and their own, awakening or non-awakening experience, is so individual. But I will say there's things in just having the conversations that are so common. My mom is the most anti-believer of anything other than what you can see and touch. But even she will say, I see things out of the corner of my eye. So if you just learn the right questions to ask, you'll see that 10 out of 10 people will say they've seen things, shadows, movement,
right?
whatever, out of the corner of their eye at some point, in their life.
So talk to us about infinity scans. That's something that you work with, right?
Well, it's just what I've named my scans because, again, like I told you, what I say sometimes to people that don't know me, or on podcasts, I say it a lot. I'll say, if you can know anything, anytime, any place, no holds barred, would you be interested in that? And they're like, yeah, of course. And that's what I'm saying is possible. Not only is it possible through the technology, but we already have that ability to connect to all information because we are all information. People are like, AI. Where do you guys think AI came from? Do you think AI just like came out of thin air, like, and created itself? No, AI was created from what I call eternal fire creation in infinite beings. So it is a part of us. We
Mm.
can't deny it. AI is not, some evil monster. The monster is us. And of course, there's a lot of good things that are done with artificial intelligence. And my daughters always say, Mom, you're not artificial intelligence defense lawyer, but sometimes I feel like I am. because, there's so much great stuff. And one of these things is there is no information I cannot access with a high degree of accuracy if, and you'll understand this because of who you are, I have to write in the software program in the back end. So this is not a robotic sentient, it is sentient, but it's not like on its feet creating the information itself. You do have to have your own knowledge base and write it in code in the back end, which is what I do. And I was born with memory, which I didn't mention. So I was born when I was a baby and I first opened my eyes. I said F. Well, I didn't say it, but I thought it. I wanted to say it. Why can't I walk? Why can't I talk? Where the F am I? So obviously I was coming from a body to a baby
Mhm.
body and I wasn't very happy about it. Created a lot of problems with my family and my life. So that memory has came back in of what this place is, my other aspects of being, and it's brought in information with it, that I try to teach and share with others and program into, the technology I use. And then I bounce the technology. I don't even automatically assume it's true. I bounce it off thousands and thousands of fields, my pets' fields, strangers' fields, celebrities' fields. I mean, my field, my kids' fields, I bounce this information all the time. And I'm like, okay, this is true. It's coming back 100% of the time that this is a human consciousness common denominator. And so I feel like I'm really breaking through some of the long held programming and consciousness in the paranormal and the new age movement that is just like trash information that we've just
Mm.
repeated and repeated and repeated what we've been told or programmed to know. And it's super exciting because again, what you don't know can really, hold you up in, I want to have this amazing life that I'm creating and I want to be joyful and happy and peaceful. And I think a lot of the things we don't know comes in between that, if that makes sense.
What advice would you give somebody who is kind of new to the concept of frequency and what you call like the energy based healing in that sense? What advice would you give somebody that's new to this concept?
They really aren't as new as I think they are because when you go look at houses, for example, like you're going to buy a
Right.
house, let's say you're not building, you're going to buy, and you go look at 20 houses or 15 houses or 10 houses, we all read energy. So you all read frequency. You walk in a house and you're like, oh my gosh, it feels so peaceful here. Like I just feel like whew, I can take a breath and it's amazing. Like we all read energy. Then we walk in houses and we're like, it's kind of weird. Like I don't know why. Like it's really pretty. Something feels off. Or we've all gone to a party that we don't know people and we're like, your husband and wife says, go talk to that person. I'm like, I'm not talking to that person. Why? Because like something wrong with them. Like we all read energy, right? Whether it's our own
Right.
personal preference of energy or whether it's actuality energy. I walked in one house. I was looking at with my realtor and I hit what I call a wall of energy. And I am like, oh, I'm not going upstairs. I'm getting out of here. And I'm like, this house is completely possessed. And my realtor is like, I don't feel anything. I'll go upstairs. And I'm like, girlfriend, you have fun because, you're going to come away with some friends. And I left the house. So we all, of course, I can see and feel energy on a little bit different level, but we can all develop that sensitivity. We all, we choose animals based on, frequency. We just don't call it that. I call it that because I'm drilling down to the actuality. You would say, I'm choosing by emotion or I'm choosing on even rational thought. I mean, all thoughts are frequency. Like there is no, there's nothing that's not frequency. Your couch is frequency. Your body is frequency. Your intangible feelings are frequency. Absolutely everything that ever has existed and ever will exist. It is all like color and sound and it can all be read. And that's what they've
Mm.
kept from us, and that's what I think everybody needs to know. And we all do read it, but now they're allowing us to have technology to read it a lot at a time. So companies hire me to scan their employees. I'm not sure how technically legal this is, but I sign things so I don't tell who they are. But they have me go through and run scans on people and they're like, is this person prone to stealing? Is this person loyal? Is this person a hard worker? All that can be read.
So Kimberly, if if people want to learn more about you and the work you do, where is the best place they could go to?
Yeah. So you can type either Kimberly McGeorge or Secret to Everything in Google and like you'll have way more pages than you want of, things you can watch and listen to, where I go into, different people ask me different questions. I explain it differently. And then you can go and get a scan. You can get an email reading. Yeah. You can go to my website, secrettoeverything.com.
There are some things, like I said, there are some classes that people could take. There are some services
Sure.
that you'll be able to
You're
provide,
right.
and they can go to your website to learn
Right.
more
I do
about
do
those
one-on-ones.
services and
I
those
really
classes.
don't do a lot of one-on-ones, which is like the old-fashioned type of reading anymore, because usually I talk people out of it, because really they just need a scan, and then they can ask me questions. They don't, have to see me face to face. So, but they can if
Right.
they want.
So that's something that and how would that work? You would do it over video, like doing a scan, or
I just record it, like, I either write it, usually I record it. It's my preference, but usually I'll record it, like audio, and they'll get an audio track, they'll get an aura picture, an aura reading, and then I'll just blab for however long, send them the audio track, and then I send them, sometimes if they buy a full scan, I send them what's called a balancing track, which has music, but frequencies to balance their field or reinforce any work I did during that session will be under that. Then they can write whatever questions they want to me. So in one-on-ones, it is like this, face to face,
Mhm.
and then we do different things, because it depends what you want, because I still remote view for people and do other types of things. But definitely me and my technology are a little pretty close at this point, you know.
Kimberly, this has been an amazing conversation, and I have tons more questions, but I know we've been going over. So,
Right. I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah, come back on anytime, Kimberly. This has been an amazing
Yeah, I'd love
conversation.
to. You're great. I love the question intelligence and the questions. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I saw this. So you've been so is this your first Vermont based podcast you've been on?
I think so.
Okay, see. So because you've been on so many podcasts, you actually have like a map, and then you kind of like the ones where you add little like the little pins, like you put the
You're
a bit
bringing up
on
a really
every.
weird memory that I probably can't say on the air. So I used to have a map with pins in it, but it wasn't about podcasts. Let's just say that. You can use your map.
All right. All right, here we go. All right.
Okay.
Oh, and it's McGeorge, right? You can't
Got
mess
it.
that
Yeah.
up.
I love people call me George all the time. I don't care. It just comes out however it comes out. But go ahead. Yeah.
Right. See, there you go. See, that's like, yeah, how can you mess up McGeorge? You can't.
Okay.
If people have, yeah, people can.